I've spent my career writing books about relationships, but I've never written a book quite like this. A book solely devoted to the ultimate in love. How do you love like Jesus? I've given 5 principles to learn how to love at the highest level. It'll transform relationships with the people that you love the most, even total strangers. This is about every relationship, and it's at the core of what it means to be a loving person.
Now, I'm not discounting that Jesus might have done something to blind their eyes or shield, but there was some reason that they couldn't see him. And they didn't recognize Jesus, and I don't know how he did it, but they were kept in the dark. The conversation ensues about the events. And after spending a considerable amount of time with them, Jesus gives them the big reveal. Luke 24, 30-32 says this: when he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks, and he broke it, and he gave it to them, and their eyes were opened. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And then he disappeared from their sight. And they asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us when we talked on the road and he opened the scriptures to us?" I'll put it to you today that sometimes we have to see with our hearts. We have to see with our hearts. I remember a time Jenny and I went out to the movies with a couple who were a friend of ours, and they bought another couple. And this was way, way, way back in the day, and there was a picture theatre at Sanctuary Cove. And so this couple was sitting between us and a couple that we knew. And all of the time while we were in that movie, I was thinking to myself, there is something wrong here. There was something in my heart was saying, there is something going on here. I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. And so the movie went through, and we got to the end. We had coffee. We said goodbye, and we were talking to our friends, and I said, I felt something odd about those people that were sitting between us. And he said, yeah, they're into astral travel and levitation and all that stuff. I thought, really? Okay, so God was telling me something in my heart, that there was something wrong there, but it was just, he didn't sort of specify it. But sometimes I believe when we're talking to people, we not only have to see with our eyes, but we have to see what God is saying in our heart about these people. And that's loving like Jesus, and that's being mindful of others. I mean, sometimes things are so obvious that we should be able to see them. And I'm guilty of this every day at work. I could be looking for a tool, and it could be right beside me, and the boys know that I do this, and they play the game now, and they say, "Oh, I found it, it's just here," and if it's not in the exact place that I think it should be, I can never find it. And it's just so annoying, I think it could be a function of age, but they call it perceptual blindness. You should be able to see something so obvious, but when we're looking down another line or we're looking at something else, we don't see it. And it's called perceptual blindness. Sometimes we just miss things that are blindingly obvious, and we need to be able to see what's going on. We need to be able to check what's going on in other people as we talk to them. Eliminating our blindness is a huge thing in our journey in loving like Jesus. So firstly, everyone wants to see. Secondly, Jesus shows us how to see. Now, the Gospels mention 40 times that Jesus saw. Now, Jesus saw, and when he saw, he was almost always moved with compassion. Always. He was moved with compassion. Jesus saw the crowd, he was moved with compassion. Jesus saw the blind man, he was moved with compassion. What about us? When we see something that's out of the ordinary, or someone that's struggling, or someone that's in pain, are we moved with compassion? Sometimes we've got the blinkers on, we've got the to-do list going, and we're just sidestepping. We're sidestepping issues, aren't we? We sidestep things. But sometimes Jesus wants us to be moved with compassion so that we get in and help people. So Jesus often saw what others didn't, and he would challenge his disciples At other times with phrases, how long must I be with you? He got a little bit, cheesed off at times, that the guys couldn't see the obvious. They couldn't see what he wanted them to see. And that's the same with us. Sometimes Jesus wants us to see something, but we're missing it. We're looking at the obvious when we should be looking with our hearts. We should be looking with the eyes of compassion. So there's a couple of stories that illustrate this. Jesus shows us how to see. Let's take the story of Zacchaeus. And I picked on Zacchaeus a few weeks ago when I was doing the Greatest Showman. So I'll pick on him again. But he was a character in the Bible, and he was a tax collector. Let's see what we know about Zacchaeus. He was a Jew, and his name ironically means righteous one. His name means righteous one. Now, he was a chief tax collector. So he had minions under him, little tax collectors, who collected the tax from fellow Jews, from their fellow countrymen, and obviously he got a cut out of all those things, plus he collected his own tax off the bigwigs, and so he was a man that just collected tax off his countrymen so he could give it to the Romans, but he took plenty for himself. So the Romans employed local men to collect the taxes, and they often extorted lots of money from their countrymen, more taxes required than the people were forced to pay. They were forced to pay this tax. So Jesus was coming to town. He was coming to Jericho. Zacchaeus, for some reason, wanted to see Jesus. So he went and climbed a sycamore fig tree. An odd thing to do for perhaps a wealthy, important man, but he went and climbed a tree, thinking maybe he'll be oblivious, he won't be able to be seen. But Jesus saw him. Jesus saw. Remember how we just said Jesus saw him? Jesus saw things. Well, he saw something different in Zacchaeus. And he said, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to stay at your place. I'm going to have lunch with you. Now, I don't know how many times Jesus did this, that he decided he's going to have lunch with someone, but he was going to have lunch with Zacchaeus because he saw something in Zacchaeus. He saw something of a different thing than the crowd saw. And so Zacchaeus came down and he came running over to Jesus and he said, yep, come on down. And then he said, you know what? Wretched man that I am, I've ripped people off. I'm going to pay back 4 times. I'm going to do this. Lord. He called him Lord. This is a tax collector. This is a hated man. This is someone. And the people are saying, he's going to be the guest of a sinner. Jesus didn't even acknowledge that. He didn't care about that. Because Jesus perhaps he saw a man that was desperately lonely, that was desperate for friendship. He was ready to change because his God was money, and he realized it wasn't doing him any good. Jesus saw something that no one else in the crowd saw in Zacchaeus, and Jesus decided, I'm going after this guy. I am going after this guy. And remember how he says he leaves the 99 and goes after the one? Well, that day, Zacchaeus was the one. He was the one. He wanted to go after Zacchaeus, and there was rejoicing in heaven that day because Zacchaeus had found the Lord. And what an awesome thing. Everyone else couldn't see anything about Zacchaeus except that he was a hated tax collector. Jesus saw something different. How about you? How about in your situation, in your life, in your workspace? Is there someone that rubs you up the wrong way, does the wrong thing continuously, is awesome, is not awesome, is terrible, and you think, what's going on? Should we be looking for something beyond the obvious? So why is that person like that? And that's what we have to do to be mindful. We have to look beyond the obvious. Look beyond the perception that everyone else has and say, why? Why is that person like that? Maybe there's someone that you can think of right now that you may be needing to just have a little chat with. Say, where are you at? What's going on? This is what we need to do to love like that. Be mindful of others and see things that others don't. So that's the first story that we can have a look at. By the way, Zacchaeus' conversion was one of the most dramatic conversions in the whole of the Bible. And it was the result of seeing what others didn't. Where others saw a paralyzed man, Jesus saw faith. Where others saw a political traitor, Jesus saw a new disciple. Where others saw a crowd of harassing people, Jesus saw people being harassed. Where others saw sinners, Jesus saw people in need of mercy. How did Jesus see what others didn't? It comes down to being mindful. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the course of my busy day and I had my to-do list going on. And so I had to go and buy some gravel at a landscaping shop. And so I went down to the landscaping shop and I parked my ute and I went in and I saw the guy and I paid my money and I wanted to pay my money, get my gravel and go about my day. But this guy obviously had just had a conversation with one of the workers who was scurrying off, and I soon learned why, and he started having the same conversation with me. And so this guy was talking about the woes of the world and how bad the world was going currently. And it was just darkness upon darkness upon darkness coming out of his mouth. And he was talking about the conspiracy theories. And he was talking about how bad the situation was over in the Middle East. And that ISIS was formed by the fact that people were about the oil and stuff. And it was a diatribe that just went on for 5 or 6 minutes or so. And I thought to myself, I have to confront this. I'm not normally a confronter. I'm just going to say that right out loud. I'm not normally a confronter, but there was something in me rising up as I was listening to this, and I felt that this guy is enmeshed in this darkness. He is just enmeshed in this darkness. And I thought, here's my strategy. I'm going to wait till he pauses for breath, and I'm going to break in. And so, boom, he paused for breath. And I said, you know what? There is a lot of darkness going on in the world. Totally true. I said, you know what else? There's a kingdom of darkness. And do you know what else? There is a kingdom of light. And I said, you know, Jesus is the kingdom of light and Satan is the kingdom of darkness. The darkness is going to have a run for a while. But I can give you the good news is the kingdom of light is going to win. You need to investigate Jesus. Boom. No, I got nothing, no. But as he picked up his jaw off the counter, I paid for my gravel and I moved out and I went on with my day. But you know what? I felt like something in my heart was saying I had to confront this guy who was enmeshed in darkness. I don't know what happened. And I wish I could tell you that occurred every day. That was about a once in a 2-year story, I'm just going to say. I wish I could say that happened every day, but it doesn't. But on that occasion, I had to do something, and I talked to him, and I went about my day. This is seeing beyond the obvious. You know, I could have easily ducked and weaved and said, yes, life is terrible, you know, paid my money and gone. But boom, I had to give him something. So there you go. What keeps us from seeing? It's one word again, it's our agenda. It's our agenda. It doesn't have to be a big, massive agenda. I know for some of us, you know, we are pastors and leaders and, you know, we're doing important stuff, you know. So like all pastors and leaders, we just have to do important stuff and we don't have to get down in the dirt, do we? No, that's not true. You know, there's a story in the Bible about the Good Samaritan, and I'm sure you all know this story very well. But that's a story about ducking and weaving. And that's a story about the priest who goes past, this guy who's groaning and in pain and is bleeding everywhere. And they're on important pastoral business. And they're going down to do some pastoral work. And they don't even look at this guy. They just walk past on the other side of the road. Priest walks past. The Levite walks past. And who should come along but a Samaritan? And a Samaritan is not loved by the Jews at all. In fact, the Samaritans are kind of like the enemy. In fact, they don't even go through Samaria. They go the other way to get to, and it could be a massive shortcut by going through Samaria, but they won't go that way because the Samaritans are the bad guys. But the Samaritan, he goes past and he sees the guy on the side of the road. You see, often our agenda doesn't let us see. We've got the blinkers on. Our agenda won't let us see the guy on the side of the road who's hurting, or the person in your life who's hurting and is struggling. And this is where loving like that becomes important. Are we going to get past our agenda, or are we going to keep our agenda and leave that person in a hurting state? That is what the story of the Good Samaritan is basically all about. Are we going to be a part of the solution and help this person, or are we going to duck and weave and say, I'm just too busy today, I'm too busy, I've got to keep going. Being mindful of others. Some of the greatest stories of your Christian life will be when it's so inconvenient to stop and help that person, but you'll be able to say later on, you know what? Something good came out of that. A testimony will arise, and you'll be able to encourage others that this person was down and out, and I just took a bit of time and I helped them out. I gave them a bit of money, or I did something and I helped them out, and boom, God moved on that situation because we took the time to help a person in need. And that is what we need to do if we're going to be mindful. If we're going to be mindful, we have to take the time to see what's going on in other people's life. So Jesus told this story, and it's about seeing. So what about you? Who do you identify with in these stories? Who do you identify with in the stories? Do you identify with the priests, or do you identify with the Good Samaritan? Do you identify with Jesus, who saw something in Zacchaeus, or do you identify with the crowd who mocked Zacchaeus? You see, these stories are not just stories. They're parables. They're stories that we can take on board and say, are we going to love like Jesus? Are we going to be mindful of people's situations in our lives? So what's the conclusion? Here's some keys. The first one is ask God for wisdom. Ask God for wisdom. It sounds simplistic, but let's ask God for wisdom. It says in James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously. We need to ask God for wisdom when we come across a situation. I mean, I'm not saying, girls, if you're at night and you're driving down the road and someone hails you down, that you should stop. There's wisdom involved. We need to have wisdom in our lives. But in our daily lives, in our relationships with people that we know, we can look, and we got to look beyond the surface. And are we brave enough to ask the tough questions sometimes? Hey, what's going on in your life? Are you okay? Can I help you in some way? Sometimes it takes 20 seconds of courage to do that. You know, we don't want to, sometimes we don't want to get embarrassed and think, they think that we're just some sort of religious nut. But no, we've got to take the 20 seconds of courage sometimes to say, hey, is there some way I can help you? Is something going on in your life? And 9 times out of 10, they will tell you. They will share with you if they know that they can trust you. 20 seconds of courage. Ask God for wisdom. Sometimes we because we haven't answered God's promptings for so long, we get unfamiliar with them. But it comes from the heart. It comes from seeing with the heart and just saying, hey, I sense, there's something going on. Can I help you with anything, And you will sometimes find that that's all it takes. All it takes is just a caring heart, a heart that says, I want to love you. I want to help you somehow. So key number 2, first one, ask God for wisdom. Key number 2, help people learn to go beyond the surface. Remember those little times that we used to have, and sometimes we still have, and go and say good day to people, and you get a little handshake, and how you going? I'm great. See you later. Let's do better than that. Let's do better than that. Maybe when we go outside today, we can find out how are you really going, what's going on, and get into some meaningful conversations, And I know that really some people freeze up when I'm saying that. Oh, I know I don't really want to reveal anything about myself. That's okay. You don't have to. But for some of us, we can get into some meaningful conversations to say, all right, what's going on in your life? Let's really find out. I know you ladies would do that at the she table, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to get in there and have some meaningful conversations rather than just, yep, doing good, brother. I'm doing well. I'm good. I got this, I mean, it's just rubbish, And we men are a bit like that, aren't we, I'm good. Don't have to talk to me, buddy. I'm good. All right, I got this. And, I think sometimes we guys, and we've got, for all of you guys, we've got this men's night going on a Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. Come along. It's going good. We're starting to open up and share stuff with one another. And that's what it's all about, getting beyond the surface of stuff. It's getting beyond the surface. And we guys are pretty good at just, I'm good, bro. I'm good. Let's get beyond that and say, okay, I need some help in this. I need some help with this. And maybe our lives will start going a bit better than what they have been doing. So let's get beyond the surface. I might get the band to come up. Would that be good? We'll get the band to come up. Key number 3, encourage one another to tell specific stories of seeing with Jesus' eyes. That's what we were encouraged last week to do. Seeing stuff with Jesus' eyes. We need to be able to see stuff through the eyes of Christ, and that's what loving like Jesus is. And we need to pray, key number 4, we need to pray for Christ-like compassion. We need to pray for Christ-like compassion. When Jesus saw, he saw with compassion. He was moved with compassion. I tell you what, if you're not moved with compassion sometimes, you need to go away and get with the Lord and ask for that compassion to come back. Because sometimes we're so enamored with our own agenda that we lose compassion. And if we don't have compassion for people, we're not going to be very effective in our walk. We're not going to be effective at all. Jesus saw and he was moved with compassion. And that's where we need to be if we're going to love like Jesus. Be moved with compassion. So what I want to do now is I want to pray, and I'd like you to stand with me this morning. And we're going to pray this morning that we can see like Jesus, we can be mindful of others, we can love like Jesus. And as I said before, I believe that if we engage with this, if we really engage with this and the coming messages, we're going to see a major change in who we are and how we operate, not only personally but as a church. Let's engage to love like Jesus. So let's pray this morning. Heavenly Father, I pray this morning for each and every person here that we will engage. That we will engage and that we will open our eyes and we will open our spiritual eyes and we will open eyes to see other people, eyes to see others in our lives that are hurting and that need your love. And I pray, Lord, that we will be mindful of their situation. And Lord, we won't be ticked off because they annoy us, but we will be mindful that they are acting like they act for a reason. And maybe there's something wrong back there in their emotional baggage. And that maybe we can have a talk and be able to do something about their situation. So, Father, help us not to be the ones that pass by on the other side of the road, but help us to be ones that say, yeah, I'm going to engage. I am going to engage. I'm going to put aside my agenda, and I am going to do what it takes to be someone who is mindful and loves like Jesus. Amen.